And then this story takes if that's not weird enough, this story takes a completely unexpected turn. The morning comes, Jacob stands up and drags that dead hip with him into his encounter with Esau, armed with a new name, which no one's ever heard before. Israel. What's El? God. What's Israel? We in the Christian community we've really cleaned up Israel. Most Christians say Israel means prince with God. And it's as if we know that He's the king and therefore we are the prince. I'm not real sure where our etymology came from on that, but it's not Israel in the Hebrew. In fact, the verse told you what Israel meant. God said, you have contended with God and with man, and you have prevailed, and therefore you're called Israel. What does Israel mean? He who contends with God. He who wrestles with God. He who jumps into the middle of it and figures it out. That's Israel. That's Jacob walking out the next day. No longer a cheater, but a man who contends with his position. And he drags that leg, and he sends the first wave, and he sends the second wave. Remember his plan? And he sends the third wave, and he sends the fourth wave. Genesis 33:1. Jacob lifted his eyes, looked, there was Esau coming. I want to read a little more scripture than, I'm going to read a little bit more than I need to, because I want to read into this story just a touch, okay? Genesis 33:1. Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So Jacob divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. And he put the maidservants and their children in front, and he put Leah and her children behind, and he put Rachel and Joseph last. How would you like to have determined your value in the eyes of your spouse that day based on what wave he put you in to go die? Okay, frontline death, step forward. I don't love you quite as much. I'm obligated to you, but I could live without you, so go. This is an amazing story. And then he crossed over before them. Give him that. At least he drags the dead hip out in front and goes, if anyone's going to die, let it be me first. And he crosses out in front of them and bows himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children. And he said, who are these? And Jacob said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maidservants came near, and their children, and they bowed down. And Leah came near, and her children, and they bowed down. And Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. And Esau said, what do you mean by all of this company which I met? And he said, these are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. Esau says, I have enough stuff, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And Jacob said, now watch this verse. And Jacob said, no, please. If I have now found favor in your sight, receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. And I felt like the Father showed me something in that text. What happened last night in the story? Jacob got into a wrestling match, and he saw God's face. And when he woke up, he built an altar to God, and he called it Peniel, the face of God. And then he walks out into a valley and he meets his brother, the guy he's positive is going to kill him. And his brother not only doesn't kill him, his brother shows him mercy and loves him. And Jacob says, when I look into your eyes, it's like I'm looking at the face of God. The encounter the night before was so that Jacob would know what God looked like, so that when he went into the valley, he would recognize God even in the face of his enemy. Because he would recognize how Esau treated him was exactly how God had treated him the night before. I welcome the confrontation. I'm going to be merciful to you. I'm going to give to you favor. And that's what Jacob walks away thinking the face of God looks like. That blows my mind. That is Jacob saying to his brother, I just had an encounter with God, and I didn't really understand it until just now. How you're treating me reminds me of God and how God treated me. And the face of God is not some abstract thing in the sky, but it meant something to Jacob. It meant something to Israel. That's his new name. that it had never met before.